Welcome to this video. In this video, I am going to talk about the application load balancer host based routing. I have made different videos on application load balancers and network load balancer. You can check all the links in the description. In this specific video, I am going to talk about how a application load balancer will help to route the client requests based on the host roles. Okay. Now, let me take the diagram and explain what we are going to discuss in this demo. Now, this is the diagrammatic representation of what we are going to do in this demo. Okay. Now, there are total 4 EC2 instances. Okay. So, all these EC2 instances are serving my application. Okay. There are 2 different types of application and I call these applications as red app, yellow app. I am taking these names because I use a color coding here and that will explain the differentiation between red app and yellow app, and this is for our easy understanding. Okay. Now, let us assume the 2 EC2 instances marked in red color, they are serving the app red, and the 2 EC2 instances marked in yellow, they are serving the yellow app. Okay. Now, the red app EC2 instances are grouped to make it a target group red. Similarly, the 2 EC2 instances in yellow, they are grouped to make it a target group yellow app. Okay. So, there are 2 target groups to group my EC2 instances based on the application that it is serving. Now, I will talk about the health check later. Now, let us talk about the load balancer. So, we are using an application load balancer to load balance our client requests. So, the client is originating his request to access one of these apps. So, if the user is trying to access the red app marked as in red color, the request comes to the load balancer and load balancer routes that request to red app. And if the request coming from the user is for yellow app and that request coming to the load balancer, and load balancer knows that the request is for yellow app and it directs that request to the yellow app target group. Fine, everything is working fine. Now, what will help or how I can define the rules in application load balancer to give that intelligence. Okay. So, on the load balancer we are defining some rules to tell, okay, if the client has specified red app in their host name, then route all the requests to the red app. And if a rule is defined in the application load balancer and that rule says if the host has the yellow app in it and route all the requests to the yellow app, you can see it here. Okay. So, for my demonstration here I am using a Route 53, and if you are not aware of Route 53, the Route 53 gives me the functionality of DNS. I have a domain, my sample domain or test domain awscloud.online. I am going to define some records in my Route 53 which is my DNS resolution, and that will help me to route my request first to the load balancer. Okay. So, the Route 53 functionality here is that I have a custom domain ASCII Labs and I am going to use a host, a custom host red app. So, to make that custom host I am using Route 53 here, but the actual functionality that we are discussing in this video is about the application load balancer, how we can define rules in application load balancer to route the client requests appropriately between red app and yellow app. Okay. So, when we are going to do the demo, I will show you what rules and how to define the rules. Okay. So, let me also define the health check here. So, health check plays a very important role for the client request using a application load balancer. So, time to time this load balancer, it talks to all these EC2 instances to make sure that it is healthy. Somehow if any of these EC2 instances is not healthy because of some reason, the EC2 instance reports in its unhealthy status to the application load balancer. Now, what does the application load balancer? It knows, okay, a particular instance become unhealthy and it will not route the client request to that particular EC2 instance. Let us say this particular EC2 instance, if it becomes unhealthy, the client request coming to this target group will go only to the healthy EC2 instance. Okay, that is what you need to understand. So, that is why I specifically mentioned health check in all the target groups for these EC2 instances. Okay. Now, very important, we are going to define the host based rules in application load balancer, which will route the client requests appropriately between these two EC2 instances, between these 4 EC2 instances. Okay. Now, I am going to switch to the console and I will show you this demo. Okay. Now, I am into my AWS console and I am going to see my EC2 instances. I have 4 EC2 instances up and running, and I used some nomenclature here for the names of these EC2 instances, and those names will tell us what app this EC2 instance is serving. If you see a red app in the name for these two EC2 instances, these two are serving the red app, and you see the 1A and 1B, that means these two EC2 instances are defined in different availability zones. So, the 1A is defined in US East 1A and 1B is defined in US East 1B. So, I choose two different availability zones. Similarly, the other two yellow apps, these two are my yellow apps, these two are defined in the two availability zones for the yellow app. 1A is defined in availability zone 1A and 1B is defined in availability zone 1B. Now, I am going to access the individual URLs before I proceed with the demo to make sure that all my web servers are up and running. So, now I am going to access my red app one by one and I will show you. Okay. So, this is my public IP. I am going to access my red app. So, I am going to access my app, the web apps, using the HTTP protocol. Okay. So, I am able to access my app. Now, the app in 1B, which is a red app, it should also give me red app. Okay. So, my web servers are working fine for my red app. Now, let me verify the yellow app. Okay, I am able to access the yellow app and also from the 1B. Okay. Now, I have successfully validated that all my 4 EC2 instances are up and running and the web server is also up and running and they are serving the pages according to the app deployed on those EC2 instances. Now, I am going ahead to create my application load balancer. So, for me to create a load balancer, I have to first group these EC2 instances into target group A and target group B, because I have mentioned two target groups. The EC2 instances serving the red app are grouped into one, they are called as target group red, and the other one is called target group yellow. So, here if you choose the load balancers, in the load balancer there is an option to create a target group. So, I am going to create a target group. because I am going to create these target groups based on the instances, I am choosing the instances option, but you have few other options to choose for your target group creation. But for simplicity, I am choosing the instances here, and I am choosing a name for my target group. It is application load balancer demo. Target group red app. Okay, I am going to use application load balancer demo target group red app. Okay, this is the name of the target group, and this is using HTTP protocol and 80. And for health checks, it is using HTTP protocol, and my app is deployed in my root, the web server root. So I am just leaving it as it is, and there are some couple of options to define how the load balancer should do health checks on these EC2 instances. So I am not going to explain all these parameters. If you need to know more about these values, I explained this in a different application load balancer demos. So I am going ahead and creating this target group. Okay, at this stage now I can define what are the EC2 instances that should be part of this target group. Okay, this is intended, this target group is intended for red app. So I am choosing the 2 EC2 instances for my red app, and then choose include. Okay, and then create target group. Now at this point of time, I have validated all my EC2 instances and created the target group. I am going to create a similar target group for my yellow app. So here I am using instances, application load balancer demo target group, yellow app, HTTP protocol, and all these values are already defined. My app is deployed in my root web server, so I will keep it slash next, and I am going to choose my yellow app, include into this target group. Okay, create target group. Okay, now I have all my 4 EC2 instances. They are grouped into 2 target groups, target group red and target group yellow. Now I am going to create my application load balancer. Right now I do not have any load balancer. Now I am going to create a load balancer. Click on create load balancer, and here if you see, there are 3 different types of load balancers that you can use. Okay, so I will talk about the classical load balancer at the end to say the difference between classic load balancer and application load balancer. But now I am choosing the application load balancer. If you see here, there are 2 types of protocols that the application load balancer can use, HTTP and HTTPS. If you remember our diagram, we mentioned that we are going to work with HTTP in this video, but I'm going to plan a different video where I will be using HTTPS with the certificates. So we'll be talking more about how to use HTTPS in the application load balancer. So if the link is available in the description, the video is available and you can watch it. Now I'm going to create the application load balancer. Click create. So here I am going to give some name to my load balancer, ALB demo. I am going to name it as ALB demo, and because the load balancer is exposed to the end users through the internet, so this will be an internet facing. But there is also a provision that if the load balancer is used for your internal load balancing, you can make it as an internal. But in this demo, because the end users are accessing the load balancer, I am making it as an internet facing. That's fine. Now the other important thing that we are going in the application load balancer is listeners. Okay, so when I am defining the listener, you can define whether the load balancer should listen the client request on HTTP or HTTPS. Okay, now I am going to choose only HTTP because, as I mentioned earlier, HTTPS I am going to talk in a different video. Okay, now the availability zones. So, I have to select the availability zones for which my load balancer should act and forward these requests to, because my EC2 instances are defined in 1A and 1B, and I am going to choose only these two EC2 instances. But if you have your EC2 instances defined in multiple availability zones, you have to select all those availability zones in order for the load balancer to forward the client request to all those availability zones. Okay, for our demo, because I created EC2 instances in two availability zones, 1A and 1B, I choose these two availability zones. So, other parameters I will keep it same. Next. So, in this tab, now it is telling some security warning. This is because in the previous page, if you remember, we selected HTTP. Instead, if you are going to select HTTPS and click next, it will not prompt you that warning. So, what it basically is trying to tell you is you are going to use HTTP, which is a non-secured one. So, it is going to give you a warning saying that okay, try to use a secured protocol. But let us use HTTP for now and proceed with the demo. HTTP and warning, please ignore this warning and proceed next. The third tab is about the security group. So, you have to select a security group which will allow the web port 80 and also port 22 in order to access your EC2 instances. But using the load balancer, you always use web servers. So, allow only port 80 in this security group. Okay, I choose this right security group and then next. And in this tab, it will ask you to create the target groups if you have not created any target groups earlier. But before I start creating the load balancer, I already created my target groups. So, I am going to choose the target groups, existing target groups, and I have to define one default application for my load balancer. So, whenever I access my load balancer, there should be a default app which will take the client request. So, I am going to choose here the red app, okay, and all the details are actually defined during the target group creation and they will be highlighted. Okay. Now, next. Remember that red app is my default app in case the client did not select any app, particular app. Okay. Now, register target section. Okay. These two are the two instances part of the red app target group. Review and create. Okay. Now, this is my load balancer home page. Now, if you see, the state is provisioning. Now, in order for the application load balancer for use, the state should be inactive. So, then only we can use this load balancer. So, we have to wait for the status to turn active. So, meanwhile, let me talk about the other values if I can talk about it. Okay, so, in the description tab for the application load balancer, it has various values, and the main important thing that we need to note is that the DNS entry. So, whenever you create any load balancer, the load balancer will have a DNS record which is a name, DNS name, and it will not have an IP address assigned. Okay. So, this is my DNS entry for the application load balancer. Now, there are other various parameters. All these parameters are chosen while we are creating the application load balancer. Okay, security group and all other attributes. Okay. And the second tab which will help us to define the listener. Remember, when we are creating the application load balancer, we defined the listener. Okay. So, when you are defining the listener, you also mentioned what is the default group that the request should be forwarded to. So, it is red app is my default app. Let me see if okay. So now my application load balancer is ready for me to use. Now let me use this and see how the requests are being forwarded. Now if I go to the description on the load balancer and take the DNS entry, access it with the HTTP protocol. Okay. So I'm trying to refresh this browser and so that it tries to access my web server. If you see, all the time the client requests are going to the red app, so it is not forwarding any request to my yellow app. The reason is we have not configured anywhere to forward request to the yellow app, and more than that we have defined red app as my default app. So whenever I access my load balancer, it always forwards the request to my red app. So the yellow app is not configured, so it will not forward any request to yellow app. Now this is not our intention for this demo. We are going to define some rules in the application load balancer in such a way that the request will be forwarded to, if the request is for red app, it will forward to red app. If the request is for yellow app, it will forward to the yellow app based on the host name. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, let me bring back my diagram. Okay. So if you remember this diagram, now I am going to define something at route 53, because as I mentioned that I already have a test domain, and I am going to specify these two records. Okay, these two records, and these two records will forward the request to the load balancer, and load balancer will further forward request to these two apps. Now I am going to define some records here in route 53, and those records are these two host names. Okay, but if you do not know route 53, don't worry, in future I will be talking about route 53, and I also made some videos on route 53, so you can visit my channel for more details on route 53. But for now what you need to know is route 53 is a DNS functionality that actually forwards requests from the clients to the load balancer. Okay, now let me go back to the console. Okay, so I'm back to my console, and I'm going to go to route 53. I'm copying my DNS record here because I'm going to use this DNS record in my route 53. Okay, so I copied this one. Going to route 53, I have a hosted zone already defined, and awscloud.online is my custom domain that is already configured in Amazon. Okay, now I am going to define a record here, and that record forwards request to the application load balancer. Now I am going to create a simple routing here. Next, okay, so define a simple record. Here I am going to specify red app. Okay, so if I type redapp.ascamlabs.online, it should point my request to the load balancer. Now in the endpoint, I am going to choose the alias to application load balancer. Okay, now here I am going to choose the US East. Okay, and then I can choose my load balancer. Okay, this is my load balancer defined. Okay, now it will be an A route, define simple record. Okay, this will be my record. So whenever I type redapp.ascamlabs.online, the request will go to the load balancer. Okay, the application load balancer. Then internally the application load balancer, it decides where to send the request from the client. Okay, they create this record. Okay, red app record is created. Now similarly, let me create the yellow app, simple record, define y app dot asclabs dot online. The endpoint will be okay ES1A and the load balancer is this one. Define this record, create this record. Okay. Now I have defined two records in my DNS, where if I type red app and yellow app, the request should go to the load balancer, application load balancer. But if you do not know too much about Route 53, how to create records, but don't worry, you just follow these steps in order to complete this demo. Okay. So what we have defined, we have defined two records in my Route 53 to route all the requests to my load balancer. Okay. Now let me go back to the EC2. Okay. So now I am at EC2 home page. Now let me take the load balancer, because load balancer we already verified. Now let me see if my URLs here are working right now. So which are http redapp.asclabs.online. I think you have to wait because we just now added those records to our DNS. Sometimes it will take some time. No, it is taking HTTPS. Let me type it as HTTP. It is routing to HTTPS. Let me take a different browser. Okay. So when I access the redapp.asclabs.online, the request is forwarded to load balancer and load balancer is forwarding that request to redapp. Now similarly, let me access my yellow app, http y app.asclabs.online. Okay. So what is happening here? When I try to access the yellow app, the Route 53, it routes that request to the load balancer, but let me take the diagram and explain it in a better way. Okay. So the end user, he is trying to access red app and yellow app using the host based URL, the Route 53, and we define two records here, and these two records are actually forwarding those requests to the load balancer. At the load balancer, we have a default app which is a red app. Here we did not mention anything about the yellow app. So whatever record that is specified here, it is just telling the Route 53, okay, if you access redapp.asclabs.online, forward that request to load balancer. Similarly, if you access helloapp.asclabs.online, forward that request to the load balancer, application load balancer. But what is happening at the application load balancer? Because we defined red app as a default app, it always forwards that request to the red app, because we have not defined anything, any logic here which tells the load balancer if about the red app or about the yellow app. Okay. Now at this point of time, we are going to define some rules at the load balancer, and those rules will tell the application load balancer how to direct those end user requests. Now, okay, I am going back to the console. Now let me write it down. Now I am at my load balancer. Now this is the actual place where we are going to define rules. Now go to the listener, because the rules will be defined at the listener. So I am in my application load balancer listener tab, and if you click here view or edit rules. So this is the place where I am going to add some rules to this load balancer to give the logic. Okay, if the host has red app, forward it to red app. If the host has the yellow app, forward it to the yellow app. Okay, now edit these rules. Okay, because this is the red app is my default app, as you saw earlier. Now the second tab, which is a plus mark, click here, then it will allow you to add some rules here. I am going to define rules here, which is, okay, add insert rule. If this condition match, what to do? Okay, I am going to add some condition here. There are various options that you can define here for your application load balancer. This is the beauty of the application load balancer compared to the classic load balancer. Okay, but classic load balancer does not have all these options, but application load balancer you can define multiple conditions here. Okay, now we are going to do the host header based. If you want to know how to do the path based routing, we have a different video, and the video link is provided in the description. Now in this video we are going to do the host based. So here, if the access is for redapp.ascmlabs.online, okay, and then forward those requests to redapp. Okay, close, save this. Okay, because I have defined one rule which talks about redapp. Now I am also going to insert another rule where if the host is yapp.ascmlabs.online, then forward those requests to LApp. Now remember, this is the place where we are going to use the LApp for the first time. Till now we have defined red app as a default app, but we have not configured any rules. But this place in the rules we are defining, if the host contains red app, forward it to the red app. If the host has y app, yellow app, and then forward it to the yellow app. I am going to save this rule. Okay, now rules are saved here properly. Now let me access the URLs now and see how it works. Okay, so this is my red app. I am going to refresh it. Okay, so it is serving from, if you see here, the response is coming from the two EC2 instances defined as red app. So you can see that by changing the IP ID. Okay, similarly now try to access the yellow app and see what happens. See, if I refresh this web browser, now this time the client connections are now forwarded to my yellow app, because I have defined a rule, okay, a rule here, and this rule forwards the request that is coming to the load balancer to the yellow app. So that is why you can see here, if I keep refreshing, the requests are going to the yellow app, and you can see the IP is changing for the yellow app. Okay, so once again, the rules are defined at the application load balancer in the listener, and those rules will forward the client request if based on the host information. Okay, so let me show you the other part, because I mentioned something about health check, right? So now I am going to take you to one of the target group, red app target group, and choose the target tab. Now if you see here, the status is healthy. Okay, so as long as the instance status is healthy, marked as healthy, the load balancer will forward requests to this particular instance. But for some reason, if the instance is marked as unhealthy, the load balancer know, okay, the particular EC2 instance is unhealthy, and it will stop forwarding requests to that particular EC2 instance. Okay, so I have a different video where I have simulated the unhealthy status for an EC2 instance and showed that the client requests are forwarded to only one single instance. Okay, so I have different other videos on the application load balancer, and if you find a link in the description, all those videos are now available. And if I specify something will be coming soon, that video is not prepared yet, and I'm planning to prepare those videos very soon. Okay, so that's all about the application load balancer on host based. Okay, let me bring you the diagram, and so you will get some. Okay, so the Red App host name using the HTTP protocol. Please note that HTTP protocol using Red App in the host name is configured in Route 53, and that request is forwarded to the application load balancer, and application load balancer has a rule, and that rule defined if it has Red App in its host name, it forwards that request to Red App. Similarly, if the request is for Hello App, by specifying Hello App in the host name and the Route 53, it just forwards that request to the load balancer, but load balancer has a rule in its listener, and that rule forwards that HTTP request to Hello App. Okay, hope this gives some idea about the application load balancer and how to use the application load balancer using host based routing. Okay, I have a different video where I have talked about the path based routing, so I suggest to go and watch that video as well. So that's all for this demo. Thanks for watching this demo, and if this is the first time you are here, please subscribe my channel to get future updates and notifications. And if you have any questions on this demo, or if you have questions on any of the AWS concepts, you can always send me an email. The email ID is available in the description, and I wait for your responses on this video. And thanks for your valuable time here. Have a good day.